Actions went on. Sula had brought 18 officers, cadets, and enlisted, along with a few civilians. The Tormenel in the Chesco gown turned out to be none other than Lady Corridon, the young head of a family lately notorious for the number of its clan leaders who had died in implausible accidents. Michi introduced her own party, and when she mentioned Martinez's name, he gave a brisk nod and made his eyes go unfocused, so that he wouldn't see Sula's expression. Michi led her guests to the line of open-top cars, identical boxy vehicles made by Sunray and painted in the viridian green of the fleet. Sula joined Michi in the lead car. Martinez took the second car along with Lieutenant Captain Naz Vijana, who had made his name suppressing the Yormak rebellion on Esli. They made polite conversation as the party sped with a whir of electric motors through the busy fleet dockyard, past the warships of the Fourth Fleet moored nose in to the planet's antimatter ring, past the work crews hustling supplies and equipment through the cargo airlocks, past wary guards in the red belts and armbands of the military constabulary. Busy though the dockyard was, it also glittered with ornament. Harzapid's antimatter generation ring had circled the planet for thousands of years, and during that time there was little public space that had not been embellished with a fresco, a slogan, a bas-relief, or an allegory. Walls were covered with artwork of the Shaa conquerors, directing their subject species in developing science and industry, in placing the antimatter ring in the sky, in sending fleets out to populate new systems. The other species bustled to follow the great master's instructions, or gaped in awe as the Shaa proclaimed the Praxis in all its majesty. The antimatter generated on the ring was shown powering merchant vessels, lighting cities, providing energy for heavy industry. Slogans urged the ring's staff to labor for the benefit of all, to work cheerfully, and let the Praxis guide your life. The ring's deck was divided by 17 avenues that stretched the full length of the inhabited areas, 17 to reflect the great master's preference for prime numbers. Cross streets intersected the avenues at regular intervals. There were trees, green spaces, statues, and fountains. The buildings looked much the same as buildings on the surface, if perhaps a little more bland and uniform, and none rose above 8 stories because there was a ceiling above, a ceiling nearly invisible behind regularly spaced lighting strips. Suspended monorail transport raced in efficient silence between the arrays of lights. The civilian areas were filled with a thriving middle class. If you were rich, you lived on the planet below, and the Shaa had been wary about allowing the urban poor to inhabit such a vulnerable installation. Families of the middling sort were lured to the ring by the promise of affordable housing, good public schools, available universities, employment opportunities, and material comfort. Necessarily, the fleet dockyard was arranged differently, with docking ports and sprawling warehouses and workshops. But the areas where fleet personnel and contractors lived looked much like its civilian equivalent. The convoy left the dockyard and entered the fleet's residential section, where they stopped at an officer's hostel covered with gold-on-brown abstract designs and brass medallions embellished with reliefs of celebrated fleet commanders of the past. The car stopped, and one of Michi's aides stepped out with a list of those to be quartered here. Sula's name headed the list, and she turned to thank Michi for her hospitality, left the car with some care as if wary of an injury, and then walked straight back to the hostel entrance. Watching Sula stride to the door, Martinez remembered her walking away from him in Zansha's lower town, her heels rapping on the pavement next to the canal. The echo of those heels had seemed to pursue him into Corona's docking tube. He took another breath. He had not realized he was so vulnerable. He had seen Sula on only a very few occasions since the end of the Naxid War, and over time he thought he'd manage a meeting well enough as long as he wasn't caught by surprise. And here he wasn't surprised. Everyone on the station had known she was coming for weeks, and he still felt as if an expert street fighter had just walloped him in the solar plexus. The echo of the heels grew louder, and then were accompanied by a tinkling laugh. Martinez turned in surprise to see a handsome couple, a young blonde woman in a canary-yellow dress with freckles spread across her snub nose,